So, hello,
But
Sonja.
I'm happy to be here and to have this chat with you today. Thank you.
Yes, I'm looking forward. So then, a very general question. So we went into quite a bit of specifics, but I want to move back to the wider scope now and ask this question: how does it actually work? What are your takes on that question, that general question?
Okay.
How does it work?
So we already said that this is subconsciously, and the way I explain it to people, because people really see this as what is going on, how do I feel, why am I having these funny sensations? And even when I started working in groups over Zoom, people still had these sensations, although we weren't in the same room physically next to one another, which is where it becomes really interesting. The coughing starts, or the yawning starts, or the fidgeting starts, and sometimes people literally fall asleep until there's a movement, and then you think, what's going on here? So,
like Ada in the series where she grabs at her neck.
Yes.
Very skeptical about this work, but eventually she feels this pain.
Exactly. So something's going on. And my general answer is, who cares how you put on the radio? You put on the radio and expect something to come on. You go to a certain station and then you get certain feedback. Nobody questions how the picture gets onto the TV. There's a technically behind it, there's waves behind it. And we as humans are actually the antenna that pick up the waves of the intention of what we discussed with the client before. So I find that even in the discussion, people start tuning in, if that's maybe a word that I want to use here. And often people say, I knew you were going to pick me for that. So people are already sensing where this is going, and they are in their body, but they are not sensing their body. They are sensing information that's coming very naturally. So every human being has this natural sensation that they can pick up in their body. So, for want of a better word, we live in an energy field. Rupert Sheldrake, who actually worked with Bert Hellinger right at the beginning, and it was him and Bert Hellinger together who started asking these questions. And Rupert Sheldrake at that time called it the morphogenic field. Today we call it the quantum field. Energy has no limits. It's not bound to a room. It's not bound to anything else. It is bound to the group of people that have come together with an intention.
I totally love that. So just to be clear, the body then becomes an antenna the moment it steps into that spatial representation. And like you said, like in a radio station, it tunes in, it picks up informational waves or resonances that rings true with that specific representation on behalf of the client.
Yes.
So it's like a radio station. You dial, you fine tune, and whoops, there's the radio station. So similarly, this work is about finding a wavelength or a resonance with the information that needs to be expressed through the antenna of the representation.
Yes. And it may not make sense to the representative at that moment as to what he or she is experiencing. And mostly it doesn't make sense. It's like, this is not me. It doesn't make sense to me, but then it doesn't have to make sense to the representative. The representative only has one goal: to give the information that is happening in the body. And I generally do not ask what you think. I generally ask, and what's happening in your body now? Because the body is so tuned in, and the body cannot lie. When we start thinking, we start developing all sorts of thoughts that may or may not be true. So when I say, what's happening in your body? The body does not lie. The body is very accurate in the representation. The only person who needs to make sense of this is the client. And that is why I check in with a client and say, I don't understand what's going on here. Does it make sense to you? And the client will say, yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. That is exactly how my father always spoke. And that's exactly how my mother always spoke. Right. That's a confirmation. And it's not that the father is in the room. It's not that the mother is in the room. It is not that we have entities coming into the room. It is simply an energy. And where does the energy come from? Let's be honest. It comes from the client, him or herself, because the client already brings that energy into the room.
So once we had a mathematician that stepped in as a representative, and of course, you know, he's very rational, things has to be logic, everything must be explained with mathematical equations, there's a certain logic to his whole perspective, and his report was, oh, I feel nothing. So I've noticed some facilitators then will try and fix this representative and say, no, you two in your left brain, or this and that and the other. In this case, the surprise came from the client. Well, that's exactly how the situation is reporting. He always feels nothing.
Exactly. So again, there are no mistakes. And so I really trust what we call the field as accurate.
So I can't encourage people listening to this enough to allow themselves the experience of getting to know this work better.